People take great joy in considering how they would have acted had they found themselves in the shoes of key historical figures. People love to consider whether they would have taken the same course of action as significant figures had they been in their position. Of course, when engaging in such consideration, one places oneself in the shoes of another. And what is oneself? Oneself is merely the consequence of the forces of nature and nurture that one has been subject to. In essence, when we ask if we would have acted the same as a historical figure, we are asking if someone with our nature and nurture would have acted as they did or differently. If oneself had the same nature and nurture as the historical figure, then would one no longer be oneself at all. One would merely be them. All behaviour is ultimately founded on causes of nature or nurture. Hence the famous nature-nurture dichotomy and debate. Sometimes the two interact in complex ways, to the point that the two labels arguably become inaccurate, reductive, and misleading when used alone. But there can be no doubt that all behaviour is ultimately a consequence of nature or nurture. No convincing alternative cause of human behaviour has, to my knowledge, ever been offered. After all, what could cause behaviour if not one's nature or one's environment? If you had the same nature and nurture as somebody else, you would be behaviourally indistinguishable from them. You are only yourself and they are only themselves because of differing nature and nurture. You are your nature and nurture. If you were in someone's position in the truest sense, if you shared their nature and nurture, then you would have undeniably acted exactly as they did. This is as true of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin as it is of Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. If the behaviour of these people was not a consequence of nature and nurture, what was it a consequence of? People offer many answers here. Some will claim that the answer is their personalities, their character. Personality and character is simply a consequence of complex interactions between factors that fall under the categories of nature and nurture. The only difference between us and the greatest people to have ever lived, as well as the very worst, lies in our nature and nurture. If behaviour is informed by these two forces and these two forces alone, then this has to be the case. And within psychology there seems to be a consensus that nature and nurture are the only causes of human behaviour. Hence the fact that the nature-nurture debate is between nature and nurture. No alternative explanations are offered. A person is merely the consequence of their nature and nurture. Nature and nurture act as powerful forces which mould people in incredibly complex ways. Picture the evilest person to ever exist. Picture the greatest person to ever exist. You only differ from them in your nature and nurture. We are defined by our nature and our nurture. You are your nature and nurture. And so are the best of us. And so are the worst of us. Surely we could never be as good or evil as these people. And we probably never will be as good or as evil as them. But that difference comes down to differing nature and nurture, not free life decisions or the character of some fantastical and fictitious immortal soul. In essence, when we consider how we would act if we were in somebody else's situation, we are not imagining if we were them, so much as we are imagining what would happen if someone with our nature and nurture was in their position. Because what are we, if not simply our nature and nurture? We are merely a walking, talking consequence of our nature and nurture. A consequence of the biological and the environmental, which bears the curse of sentience. That is what we are. Puppets to nature and nurture. Nature and nurture are the dichotomy. Any other influence on human behaviour is inconceivable. All other explanations of human behaviour that I have yet encountered either fall beneath the categories of nature and nurture, or are plagued with idiocy. Some posit that the immortal soul guides human behaviour. The main issue with this is that there is no reason to believe in the immortal soul. The idea that we have within us an innate force that dictates our actions and guides us is not itself terribly flawed. For in many respects, that is exactly what nature is. Even if the magical and fantastical idea of the immortal soul was proven, the consideration I offer here would not change greatly. I would merely include the immortal soul under the category of nature. Because what is an inherent characteristic if not a component of one's nature? Of course, the idea of free will is often offered as an explanation of human behaviour. The idea of free will is ridiculous and outright magical. I cannot even conceive of what free will would look like and how it could work. What even is free will, and how does it work? What does free will even mean if not an intuitive perception of choice, where in fact the choice has already been made by nature and nurture? Certainly it is merely an illusion created by our intricate and complex consciousness. In truth, we are not free. We are puppets to nature and nurture. Still, even untruths and illusions can have value, and this does not justify completely discarding free will as an idea. But ultimately the conception of free will is born out of intuition, as opposed to any serious reasoning. We get to feel like we have free will, but feeling does not guarantee consistency with reality. If you have any other forces which you think cause human behaviour, I am most interested in hearing about them. What could possibly drive our behaviour, if not our environment or nature? Similarly, our personality and character are merely consequences of these forces. We are merely consequences of nature and nurture. This is not necessarily a bad thing, and it is no excuse for endless negativity and nihilistic idiocy. So long as we are capable of feeling pain and pleasure, such sentiments will remain our enemy. And the capacity for pain and pleasure is as deeply encoded in our nature as anything. Pain and pleasure are the two inescapable forces that give everything else its meaning. The two ultimate axioms. The inherent evil and the inherent good. Their power is as terrible as it is indescribable. Every sentient being knows it. They are the ultimate authority. They are the ultimate sovereign masters, as Jeremy Bentham wisely proclaimed. Some people seem to believe that the rejection of free will posited here is antithetical to both morality and irrationality, two things which are at the core of my worldview. This is a mistaken belief. Rationality is tied to human nature. Our intelligence gives us the capacity for it. Our ability to feel pain and pleasure provides a basis for it, and our environment gifts it something to interact with. Rationality is perfectly compatible with such a deterministic worldview. Rationality is a force of nature and a force of nurture that guides our behaviour. It is a force of nature, as nature provides the capacity and incentive. And it is a force of nurture, as our environment can help us to learn to properly use it. Our environment can help us greatly in refining it, although rationality can of course be put to use, developed and refined within one's own mind, and certainly it should be. Of course nobody has any real free choice, but a lack of choice is not antithetical to rationality. A lack of choice does not mean that some choices are not more or less desirable than others. Only a fool would suggest such a thing. The existence of pain and pleasure means that some choices are most certainly more or less desirable than others. Rationality is a deterministic force that can cause one to make the more desirable choice. With the capacity and incentive provided by nature, and the capacity for much learning and development provided by nurture, rationality can become a powerful cause of desirable decision-making. Rationality can determine desirable behavior. And just as rationality is compatible with the rejection of free will, so is morality. Our intelligence gives us the capacity for rational moral consideration. That is the employment of rationality when considering the well-being of others. Our ability to perceive pain and pleasure incentivizes such consideration. And our nature as social beings necessitates such consideration. Ultimately, one of the environmental factors that help to determine how people behave is how they feel they are expected to behave, or how they feel they should behave. Morality is perfectly compatible with a world devoid of free will. Few sentiments are as dangerously illogical as the idea that morality dies with free will. So long as we have intelligence, so long as we have pain and pleasure, so long as we have social interaction, morality will be a necessity, and all of these things are very real. They exist independently of the myth of free will. Likewise, ideas still have significance in a deterministic world. Ideas are environmental features that influence us. They are things that we can create, follow, and embrace due to our intelligence. Our intelligence gives us a capacity to construct and interact with ideas. Our ability to perceive pain and pleasure provides us with an incentive to create and interact with them. And our nurture exposes us to their influence, as well as providing the perfect setting for their alteration and creation. Nature and nurture give great value to morality. Both rationality and morality are left standing as strong as ever in the wake of free will's death. And even accepting that free will is an idiocy, a false belief incompatible with the reality of nature and nurture as the sole causes of human behavior. This does not necessitate that the idea of free will face destruction. For reality and truth only matter insofar as they are useful. Sometimes it is most wise to embrace a useful and rationally desirable untruth or illusion. One must be aware of the truth and reality in order to determine whether the untruth or illusion is more useful and rationally desirable than it. But one can be perfectly rational while rejecting truth and reality. Because truth and reality only matter insofar as their acknowledgement is useful and rationally desirable. Beyond that, untruth and illusion can be as rationally desirable and useful as any truth or reality. Untruth and illusion can be embraced in deeply rational ways. Sometimes untruth and illusion are rationally desirable. Sometimes truth and reality are rationally undesirable. The rational actor is not condemned to be enslaved to truth and reality. For the truth is that sometimes truth is ignored by the rational. For the reality is that sometimes it is rational to reject reality. It is not about what is true, so much as it is about what is useful and rationally desirable. Sometimes truth and reality are, and sometimes untruth and illusion is. One can even change from truth to untruth, reality to illusion, whenever such a switch is rationally desirable. If one's decisions are founded on rationality, there is no inconsistency. One can live as if free will is real when rationally desirable, before adopting a deterministic view whenever such a view is rationally desirable. Indeed, many a rational actor will be inclined to do just that. The intelligence and sentience of our nature gives us the capacity for, and sometimes encourages the embrace of untruth and illusion.